I'm really excited to have Shady over here. Shady is one of the OGs of DeSci, and if you're at all involved in any of the more public events at like ETH Denver or any of those bigger ETH events, you'll know that Shady works very diligently with a group of other people to really make those things come to fruition. So Shady, I'm gonna hype you up right here. So Shady got his PhD from Georgetown in neuroscience. And actually, I'm also a neuroimmunologist, Shady, so we should talk science one of these days. But he's also, and when I joined the decentralized science space about 2 years ago, he was the founder of a project called OpSci, which is a nonprofit to develop web native open science tools. But more recently, and I think what's really exciting is he's co-founded a company called Holonym, and Holonym is a zero-knowledge identity solution, and it's gaining a lot of traction. People who are involved in Gitcoin will see that it's actually one of the Gitcoin stamps for the Gitcoin passport, and I think announced just the other day was some integration with the L1 Phantom, which is really exciting, Shady. And so yeah, so Shady, as the crypto people would say, is a gigabrain in the space, and we're really lucky to have him as one of the core individuals that's pushing forward this space while trying to maintain the ethos that comes behind decentralization and Web3. So Shady, it's a real pleasure of ours to have you here to kickstart the event, and yeah, we're really excited to hear what you're up to with Holonym, decentralized identities, zero knowledge proofs, and all of that. So take it away.
Incredible. Before I get into it, and thank you so much for the really kind introduction. You're too kind. Yeah, it's great to be back. It's incredible to see all of the traction you guys have had at ResearchHub and beyond, just within the overall wider DeSci space. It's clear that we're onto something that isn't just another, throwaway hype cycle, but rather there's a very simple and demonstrable pain point within the global culture of science that has been migrating over to digital science tools with really the advent of the momentum of the open science movement in the early 2000s. So, we can be doing science better. And what is this ultimate vision that is starting to formulate, to coalesce around the different efforts that people are pushing forward, everything from open source publishing to online communities for crowdsourcing data, peer reviews, incentive mechanism design, better ways to capture IP and return the value that it creates back to the creators, better ways to think about digital science overall. So today I want to talk a little bit about kind of this concept of, first off, I want to frame the conversation with why are we here? Because I think it's really important to just take a step back as frequently as possible while we're at this really early stage and remind each other and ourselves why we are here, and to constantly iteratively update that as we both differentiate into different arms that are very much needed and required to push our mission forward of global decentralized scientific practice. But also to really be able to eloquently put together a narrative that appeals not just to our niche bubble, but to others that we want to loop in and have participate in the upside or the benefits of this technology. So, what are we really playing for, right? This kind of idea of this infinite science machine, right? We're running these, a lot of decentralized science projects will say that Ethereum or blockchains are really important for their application or vision for science. But I think the vision here that I've heard, at least from the past couple of years of interviews, talking with scientists both in and outside of the movement as properly defined. And what I keep hearing time and time again is that we want to move towards a future of science that's open source, that's participatory, that's permissive, that allows for a pluralism of different ideas and thoughts and models to compete against each other and be able to push forward the kind of impact we want to see throughout the world. And a big part of that is decentralized web technology. And I'll get into a little bit about why that decentralization is important. Is a very important prefix for web technology in general to empower the next generation of scientific tooling and coordination. So one question I like to try to bring up over and over again is, what does success really look like for DeSci, right? So if we go out and look at the world today and see examples of successful movements or technological trends, we can put dollar signs behind things. We can take a look and say, hey, look at this. The total digital content creator market capitalization is $100 billion, right? So these are people from all over the world that are posting pictures about cats, about travel blogs, about do-it-yourself videos. And the structure of the internet has allowed people to actually be able to generate some, maybe even potentially living income from just creating content, right? If we compare that, for example, against the content that comes strictly from top tier scientific production outlets, like let's say Harvard Research, which is at the top of global lists, depending on how you look at it, still remains at the top. You have about 100x, which is kind of an interesting comparison, 100x difference there between how much funding is being driven into these ecosystems. And again, this is per annum, so the comparison isn't direct, but it is kind of important to take a look at how money flows through our economy in different ways, and what does our future look like if some of that was diverted in other ways. And if we just take a moment of modesty to look at where DeSci has come so far, relatively speaking, we're still very nascent with less than $50 million total, unless I'm missing any big ones out there, raised by venture capitalists to fund innovative and very compelling visions for a DeSci future. And if we go one step down, right, looking at more community-driven efforts through Gitcoin grants, which rely on community votes and more decentralized processes for identifying projects that will have meaningful impact as ethereally defined, no pun intended, by the community, we're looking at even smaller, tiny drop in the bucket. There are other ways to look at success as well for DeSci, right? It's not just dollar signs. We could also take a look at artifacts produced. So again, comparing against the billions and billions of daily videos, posts, and articles about cats, about the best travel itinerary. There's about 3,516 artifacts produced by Harvard researchers every year. And that puts them very, very close at the top of the list, just under the Chinese National University, which produces about 4 to 5 times more artifacts per year in chemistry and physical sciences, whereas Harvard is really well known for health sciences and biology. And comparing DeSci against that, I think the most productive elements for our movement, we have a couple IP NFTs, a couple patient data DAOs, a handful of publications here and there, but the movement's still pretty nascent. I think that's, the impact is difficult to measure throughout DeSci. In accumulation, cumulatively, there's a total of about 100 DeSci Gitcoin grants that have ever been applied for funding or been submitted to a Gitcoin grants round. And these cover a very wide area of everything from cat longevity to computational neuroscience models of cognition and inference to marine biological preservation attempts. So it's early, the net is wide. It's been cast very, very wide. And I think we have a long ways to go where these billions of daily videos, posts, and articles, DeSci captures some portion of the total output of the internet, of the content, of the information, to ground it and root it into basic observations about the universe, the world, the role of humanity in that world, and the ability to move our society forward. So, this is just a few ways to think about success for DeSci, right? Like we could even put out examples and say, hey, like the more people that are able to access data, the more people that are able to engage with scientific artifacts, that's success, right? And maybe that's what resonates with you. You could also say, hey, well, if we could elevate the average information channel between any two people or any two agents to include more complexity, more richness, more computationally verifiable references to real data, to real real information that's been generated through a scientific process, right? Where we're communicating with each other about verifiable information or verifiable knowledge about the world. Others might say, hey, we just need to look at the metrics. What's the total productivity output? Is the average lifespan expectancy going up or cancer rates going down? And then others might say, hey, look, we just need to look at the size and the extent of the total knowledge we've put out there, whatever that means. These are all great ways to paint a vision, but I think when it comes to putting rubber to the road, it becomes very difficult to truly characterize these things. Now, bringing us back to this idea of an infinite science machine, right? So one of the great benefits of decentralization and utilizing a public blockchain like Ethereum is that once you deploy a smart contract on this distributed network, you can't take it back, right? It's an act of almost birthing some sort of cybernetic life. And today, as we sit here and ask ourselves, why are we here? What does success look like for us? We have a series of decisions that are laid out before us. And each decision that we make will take us between one of two paths, which I believe only one will actually materialize if we actually get to where we're going. One is a non-consensual human-computer interaction future where there's one protocol out there that doesn't support a plurality of different perspectives or views, but a single protocol that tells us what the public good really is and enforces our actions and prompts us with instructions to participate in this pretty monolithic, dogmatic type of world. The other path, I believe, is more humanistic and involves a protocol that acts as a public service to humans, where agency is siloed within the individuals, the participants in the ecosystem, and there's a clear distinction between an autonomous process and an agent that's interacting with their own free will. So how do we co-opt this human-centric path? I think really key to this is voluntary cooperation in these decentralized systems. So Ethereum comes out as a really great framework or platform, both for one dogmatic, let's say like end state to occur, but also for the ability to folks to cooperate around any group-directed goal behavior with embedded consent, where you can point to consent, revoke consent, be able to opt in or out of different systems, where it's the norm to fork if a particular protocol isn't working for you or isn't serving the interests of your community. There are tons of weaknesses with these public blockchain systems, and one of them is the privacy conundrum, right? So you could imagine you might have an organization of patients that have elected to use Ethereum as their de facto method for organizing or coordinating their behavior, such as contributing data, participating in paid experiments, or voting on who gets to access that corpus of data or not. The problem with this is on Ethereum as it is, or any smart contract compatible platform, is a smart contract that's executable, say for a vote of which data we should use or not, will have these agents that can participate almost blindly within these votes. And it's very difficult to know if these agents are real people or real patients, or if they are perhaps bots, or maybe they're the same person who's bribed other folks to vote in the same way. So it's very difficult to detect collusion. It's really common for Sybil attacks or bot attacks to overwhelm governance in these types of systems. And privacy is either black or white, right? So you can either enforce a KYC process where everybody that's participating in this voting has to reveal themselves on chain, but in effect, their identity is going to be completely revealed for all time, that those nodes are storing that past history of the blockchain and all the votes that have occurred before it. So it's a big problem. Reputation systems have been proposed as a key solution to this, but reputation is really, really hard. It's very difficult to verify behavior off-chain, such as whether you've completed a clinical trial or whether it really is you getting paid for the data that you're providing, and not to somebody else that's perhaps has stolen your identity and is receiving your payments for data that you've provided. Consent is very difficult to maintain in these systems. So one major effort that our team has been focused on over the past year and a half now is building a solution to on-chain privacy. And what we've come to is an architecture that's not new, it's quite old. We think of it as a tornado cache of identities. It's a mixer where once you verify some fact about yourself on-chain, you can wrap it in a cryptographic wrapper and put that on-chain mixed with other identities such that it becomes incredibly computationally intractable to brute force or identify a particular person on-chain as that same person who holds a passport or a DMV issue driver's license. So the way that we think about it is that any user can interact with any third-party issuer, receive their signed cryptographic credential, and then once they're on chain, they're completely private and can produce true false statements about their identity, such as that they are a person and not a bot, that they've consented to a particular research process, that they have or haven't voted, that they're from a particular jurisdiction, and so on. One of the major challenges, okay, great, we have a solution for on-chain privacy, but there's still a major problem here. Okay, great, you're private on-chain, which means that once you've gated your application to an individual that has proven certain things, you kind of lose the ability to hold them accountable after that point because you don't know who they are in these systems. They could use different accounts and transfer proofs to those accounts as they renew their credentials. A really key solution to drive zero-knowledge proofs for this sort of application is the importance of compliant backups for transparent accountability. What does this mean? Here we're thinking about privacy as a right, such as once you join a particular DAO or engage in commerce, in a decentralized commerce with, say, a DAO or a DeFi organization, you would be effectively prompted with consent. And you would say, I consent to these rules. I consent not to behave in this way. I consent not to rug pull or perform adversarially or break any laws that are part of me behaving in this organization. And what we've done is built a compliance module that codifies the consent of specific rules such that a user will be able to verifiably encrypt identifying information to a multi-party compute decentralized data store. And as long as they abide by the very rules, a smart contract will only gate access to their identifying information if they can verifiably be proven to have broken one of those rules. So here, privacy is a privilege, not a right. And you lose that privilege if you break the rules that you've consented to. It's a compromise. It's not perfect, but it helps us start thinking about systems where we can begin to have accountability with transparency and consent into these systems. And I think systems like this are going to be very key. What's important is always considering where the role of where the role of the individual is and the consent, and where the third party, what are these rules that you're consenting into? I think those are going to be the real devils in the details as we move towards decentralized permissionless layers with accountability embedded within them. This architecture can be flipped on its head, and this is the second problem that we've been focusing on this year, to not only silo away identifying information for protocols that want to make sure that all of their members don't defect or begin behaving adversarially once they've inherited privacy. You can also use this to store your own cryptographic keys in a decentralized network where you can only gate access to those keys if you're able to present a proof of selfhood with associated consent. This means now we can have truly non-custodial keys that belong to the user and are tied to that user's identity. It's a very complex problem, and I need a whole nother 20 minutes to talk more details about this. But here we're effectively targeting the ability to prove, to perform abstractions about who you are, identity proofs, to form identities that are portable, that can be avatars associated with particular behavior in particular DAOs or particular organizations. We could do this permissionlessly. And the last key missing ingredient is agency and self-sovereignty over keys to always be able to guarantee consent into these types of organizations or decentralized contract agreements. So definitely reach out to me if you want to learn more about how this all works. But where we really want to go, and I've kind of already hinted at this, is for these decentralized science systems to accomplish the goals that they would like to, with this pluralistic future in mind, where agency is one of the incompromisable or uncompromisable attributes of any DeSci system, is we need private and self-sovereign identity. We need to have cryptographic tools that your grandma could use, that anybody could use, especially those who are participating in a clinical trial. And underlying all of this is going to be trust, especially if we seek to deliver a solution to mainstream entrenched institutions, and that's tools for transparency and accountability. I think I'm right at time here, so I'm just going to wrap it right up. I just wanted to thank the organizers for inviting me again today, and more than happy to take any questions if there's time.
Yeah, actually, Shady, we've got about 10 minutes left here, but yeah, we can have a little discussion. So anyone who's in the audience, please like submit questions into the Q&A, and then we'll read them out loud over here. But yeah, I can kickstart it, and then I think Ricardo will hop in right after. I wanted to, by the way, great presentation, Shady. Thank you for, especially the beginning where we're trying to help preserve a lot of the ethos that comes with, you know, decentralization and keep that maintained. Let me switch my camera on and keep that maintained throughout DeSci. I had one question, and I think it became like, I guess, more publicly contentious after the whole WorldCoin launched, which is like, what exactly are the drawbacks and the pros and cons of various types of ways of determining personhood? So, you know, things like doing the biometric scanning, and then also what goes in, maybe not goes into that, but a little bit tangential is actually, I'll just leave it at that for now.
Yeah, I might have lost the last bit of your question because of my internet connection is a little unstable right now, but I'm assuming it's a question about WorldCoin and the controversy around proof of personhood. Is that right?
Yeah, proof of personhood, and just like what the best and the drawbacks of various mechanisms of doing that. So like, for example, at ResearchHub, we have, you know, obviously people who come in who are either bots or are trying to behave nefariously on the platform. And so what are like the best ways of identifying personhood in a make sure to maintain civil resistance that's actually feasible to do and maybe a little UI UX friendly? And you're muted in case you're talking.
Hey, sorry guys, just having a bit of an issue with internet connection here.
We could hear you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, I think I caught most of that. So yeah, so it's really interesting. If you go back to these discussions around identity, specifically biometrics versus government identity versus more lighter forms, I think since the early 2000s, there's been a push towards stronger and stronger forms of digital identity. Some of it was really pushed forward by the PCIe, which is basically a regulation that was put into place to combat anti-money laundering. It was first introduced actually in the early 70s under the Nixon administration to make it easier for consumers to request like refunds on like unauthorized transfers, and to basically have more control over how transactions are performed more in the favor of the consumer. So once the internet kind of came about, governments had a really difficult time enforcing geopolitical, I guess, you know, policy. And none of this was like, I think, you know, the hardest really, I think some of the like companies like PayPal, right, eBay, and eventually Google found themselves in this kind of quagmire where they were holding a ton of government data and they were starting to receive tons of audits. So are you guys still with me? Okay, cool. Yeah, sorry, I'm just keep losing here. But yeah, so you might recall actually like late 2000s when government rolled out, or I'm sorry, Google rolled out this really controversial eye tracking technology to basically be a better version of CAPTCHA in the early days of the web, where bots were a huge problem before you had serverless architecture and other more now mainstream ways of preventing bots. And the backlash to that was insane, right? So Google quickly spun down that program, never mentioned it again. And it's quite a bit of a shame because eyes actually have quite a bit of data that's associated with them and could have been used for many public health, research or projects. But at the time, I think like nobody really trusted that Google, who was complying with all of these audits or these those warrants for data at the time, and this was pre-GDPR, so consumers didn't really have any form of protection to point to. I guess this is all a really long-winded way of saying that it's really fascinating now that eyes are now back in the equation. And it's a company like OpenAI, which is really pushing this forward because they know that this is one of the few ways to really achieve proof of personhood in a relatively robust manner. It's not perfect, right? Your eyes do change over time. It doesn't include people with macular degeneration or eye injuries, etc. My main gripe with eye scanning is that the hash of your eye is not something you can take back. So WorldCoin knows this, and they implement something called a session ID. So actually what you do when you get your eye scan is you also create a session on your mobile phone when you perform the process, and that's appended with some salt, basically like a cryptographic way to prevent to prevent somebody from just brute forcing the hash. They add the session ID, append it with some salt. And this way, what they store on chain is not a direct link to the hash of your eye. However, you still have to trust that the hardware and the centralized registry that matches the salt with the session ID with the hash of the eye is somewhere safe and secure, and that they'll never give it up. So that's difficult. I think that's like really difficult to accept. One of the strongest, I think, I believe government ideas are better for this purpose, because even though a government might revoke your ID, you can always change your ID, right? The hash that's generated from your government ID isn't fixed to you as an entity, as a person. So you can go to another country, you can get another document, and you can have more flexibility in this way.
Yeah, I guess all that to say, there's trade-offs even with some of these tools like that in crypto and DeSci. We are offering as solutions, and they're like incremental or stepwise improvements, really big improvements, but there's always going to be some trade-offs, or like I guess nothing is completely foolproof. But yeah, Ricardo, I know we have some questions in the Q&A, but I don't know if you wanted to go next.
Yeah, I'll just take one from the Q&A, just for the sake of time. So Michael asks, does Holonym have plans to work with ERA commons like OrcID? I'm sold on the theory, but where are we logistically to actually onboard higher education researchers and administrators?
Yeah, I think so. Actually, Holonym started off as a project to verify OrcIDs. Last year at ETH Amsterdam, we launched a prototype that allowed you to sign in to Ethereum with your OrcID. So this means basically an Ethereum wallet or an address or access to some dApp would be gated by whether you had an OrcID or not. So this was great because it proved that a particular Ethereum address owned a specific OrcID, though there was tons of weaknesses with that particular solution. So the first was you couldn't really guarantee that the person that controlled that OrcID was that person and hadn't, falsified records, unless you're using some sort of institutional SSO in conjunction with that. The second is that the OrcID and the email address were all put publicly on chain, and that's a huge no-no. Because it enables all sorts of foul play and different types of phishing attacks. We would love to continue research along this road using ZK proofs on JWTs, which currently the only implementation that I've seen, aside from what we've put in our white paper, is ZK login by Sui blockchain. But they use a centralized ZK because the proof generation requires a ton of computational power. It can't be done on consumer hardware like the current Holonym app allows basically all the ZK computations done on your computer. For taking a really complex JWT, a JSON web token, such as an ORCID authentication session, that's very difficult to compute. So we'll have to see where the research takes us from here and what we can actually implement. Laura Hack, who's the founder of ORCID, is one of our advisors. So we're constantly, this is a very hot topic that we throw back and forth constantly. So it's something definitely on our radar.
Awesome. Thank you. Thank you for replying. And I know we're just on time. I'll take just like one last question. So can you say more about how the privacy will be a privilege instead of a right in the initial instantiation of your identity protocol? So basically what you just talked about before, saying a bit more about, why is that a privilege instead of a right?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, so the compliance module is not live. It's the code for it is actually one of the very few things that's private on our repository. Oops. Sorry, guys, terrible connection today.
We can still hear
you. Guys can hear me? Okay. Yeah, so the code, it's been written up, and if it's something that you're interested in, please do reach out to us. I think, the world, the Web3 world really isn't mature enough to, I think, just release this out into the open. I think, we really want to work closely with folks that are interested in this. So the common example, the most like base level example would, for example, be like a DeFi protocol that wants to ensure FinCEN compliance with popular or mainstream AML laws across jurisdictions. And say, for example, if anyone that joins this permission DeFi pool interacts with a blacklisted address, like say a well-known hacker or state-sanctioned entity, that you would revoke the permissions of that particular address. And basically prevent them from participating in the pool. So the way that would work is you would have an off-chain listener that basically is looking for any interactions between addresses or accounts that have consented into the permission protocol, and looking to see if it interacts with any high risk or sanctioned addresses. That listener would also be listening on the behalf of a particular auditor, such as, say, an AML compliance officer, basically being authorized by the AML compliance officer. And that listener would then request the MPC network, once those conditions have been met, by presenting it with those conditions and saying, hey, 0x123 interacted with this known North Korean hacker address, 0x551. We're requesting a decryption of the PII to the public key of this auditor or AML compliance officer. And then that AML compliance officer would review the information and then file a suspicious activity report, as they normally do, like whenever you interact with the bank. So that would be the actual applied use case for DeFi. I think there's other use cases for patient data DAOs, but I think they're all going to be really different, and a lot of thought needs to be taken into what the access conditions are.
All right. Awesome. Thank you so much, Shady. And yeah, we're up to time now. So we're going to get the next set of speakers onboarded up here. But yeah, I want to thank you again, Shady, for your time and for answering all of our questions. I know that Sybil resistance is a big problem across all of
thank you guys. You're welcome.
With crypto. But yeah, thank you so much.